Okay, today's lecture will cover the outline and moving from the outline to your rough draft, your first rough draft. So if you look on your left, you will see the outline that I had in the previous lecture from the PowerPoint is very brief. There's not a lot of details, and usually this is not the type of outline I like to use personally. The outline on the right is typically what I like to use, and I will explain why one works better than the other. So the first one, you just have the basic introduction, but knows that there isn't a thesis. It just has the thesis placement. I don't know what the thesis is. I don't know what I was intending to say or intending to do. I just listed some basic visual concepts, again, not knowing how it's going to fit or what to do with it. And so I don't have much to work on here. And also the same thing can be said about the conclusion. I don't know what my conclusion is or what I want it to be. But everything centers around your thesis statement. Your thesis is the focus of the paper. It anchors everything. It helps the readers to follow your line of reasoning. So moving to the more detailed outline, I have my title. My introduction is going to provide my context, but I've also have a tentative thesis. Notice that it says tentative, meaning that it's subject to change, and it may change, and you want to try to be flexible about that type of change. Because when you start building your paragraphs, sometimes it may not flow, and you want each sentence to connect to the next. Every sentence is interdependent on the previous, so you want to be open to that change. And I can tell you that the thesis that I have here is not the thesis that I have in my rough draft, because I mentioned Banksy and I mentioned where the image was taken previously, so there's no need for me to say it again in my thesis. So I have changed it, and I may change it again when I start revising and editing the paper. But again, it gives me some type of focus. Without that focus, I don't know what to say and how to say it. Another thing that you'll notice that I've changed some of my body paragraphs. In the previous outline, I started with the subject rather than the allusion, and given the fact that I'm going to give some context about the Wall Street bailout, I felt that it would be a nice flow to move from that context to historical context. I'm not going in chronological order because that would make sense, but I am going to begin with the context of the Wall Street bailout, because it helps my readers to know why Banksy is creating this image, and how then Marie Antoinette's quote relates to that image as well. So I'm trying to connect the things together, and I feel like if I do it now here in my outline, I won't have so many problems when I start revising and editing my paper. I like the detailed outlines because I write complete sentences. I oftentimes can cut and paste what I put in my outline into a paragraph, and just elaborate on them. So I have more to work with here than I would if I just used a very brief outline. So again, my first paragraph, I'm going to discuss the allusions in the paper. Let them eat crack. I'm going to explain why she said it, the details behind it, and also, since I was discussing the allusion, I considered putting color here as well, but I believe I'm going to put color back underneath the subject because it is on the subject's hand. So even as I am building my outline, I know there are some things that I may need to change, and I've already started making those changes in my rough draft. But again, the outline still gives me much more focus had I not had it. So my paragraph 2, because of the alignment of the words, let them eat crack, that first catches your eye because it is in color, and it is red, and then from there our eyes move to the giant rat, the big fat rat, and just even the rat being fat suggests that the rat is being well fed, that is living comfortably, and again that alludes to Banksy's feelings about Wall Street and the Wall Street bailout. And from that point, I will discuss the objects. Now, even though the subject, which is the rat, is holding these objects, I want to treat them separately, because I think that's what Banksy wants us to do, is to treat these objects separately. The rat is the subject, but the objects in the rat hands helps to solidify what Banksy is trying to say about this issue. Again, he is creating a visual argument. It is an argument, so therefore it's going to have a main idea. It's going to utilize ethos, pathos, and logos as well. So I'm going to treat the subject and the objects separately. And last but not least, my conclusion will be my evaluation. I briefly mentioned how I felt about Banksy's image and how some people may find it to be just graffiti and not art, but I beg to differ, because it has a deep and profound message about the economic collapse and the Wall Street bailout. So you see my outline here is quite detailed. It's 2 pages, 355 words. So it's a lot of work. It took me a day to do it, but I feel better about the paper now that I have something to reference as I build the paper. And so here is the paper, the rough draft. It's 344 words, 2 pages long. It's in MLA formatting already. That's something that I always do when I write a paper. I immediately put it in MLA page formatting, just so I do not have to worry about this step later on. I have a video from Purdue OWL that's posted under the grammar and the MLA documentation tab that you can refer to as to how to create a MLA page formatted paper. So again, similar to my outline, I began with the basic details about the bailout. I detail who Banksy is and the title of it, and all the details that will be necessary for this assignment. There are no sources here about Banksy, because like I said, I've been following him for a while, so I am familiar with him. But I did reference an article about the bailout just to make sure that my information was accurate, because I'm quoting a number. So because I'm using numbers, and or if I was using stats, you want to tell where you retrieve that information, because it helps to establish your credibility as a knowledgeable writer. So to ensure that I knew exactly what I was talking about as it pertains to the bailout, I made reference and I cited my sources. So if you use something and it's not common knowledge and you didn't know it prior to, you must cite that information in your paper. But also in the paragraph, notice that I have here, discuss briefly the rhetorical situation. This is something that I'm debating if I should put in there or not. I do mention that this was he painted this in Soho. I also mentioned when it was painted, but I feel like there's more details that I need to put in there about the audience. Because this is in Soho, a cultural art district, how would they connect to this image as compared to if it was in the Bronx or Brooklyn? So I feel like I may need to mention something about that somewhere in the paper. But again, if it was somewhere like that, would they understand the illusion? So these are some things that artists and writers must face when they're creating anything: is would the audience get it? And then here's my thesis. Notice that I did change it. The mural, Wall Street Rat disputes the U.S. government's apathy towards its citizens' needs as opposed to its involvement with the lavish lifestyles of corporate America. So I tweaked it a little bit. I'm still not sure if I like it, but again, it gives me something to anchor my thoughts. Here's my first paragraph. Again, I am talking about Marie Antoinette. I'm giving some of the historical context to the issue, and because this is not common knowledge, and I do know about Marie Antoinette, but I do not know a lot, I cited where I retrieved my information. I do not have direct quotation marks around anything except for the phrase "let them eat cake," because for most of the part I have only summarized the information that I retrieved. So I moved from Marie Antoinette to making the connection between this historical allusion and how Banksy is using it, and that's where the interpretation comes in. I'm putting it together to make my interpretation clear. And that's why I have right below my citation, Banksy's reference to this tragic event works twofolds. It alludes to the social travesty of drug use, meaning the crack that plagues inner cities, and it provokes a desire and need for change. The antagonistic scene and its color for Banksy should incite anger in every U.S. citizen. Immediately, I know that I have not discussed this concept of color, which is why in my outline I have color right below that, because again, the words "let them eat crack" is in red, but it's also on the subject's hand, so I'm struggling where to put that. I still think it needs to go here because it's more profound there than it is on the rat's hand, but again, the rat's hand pushes the idea. So I'm still working on that, but again, I have mentioned it, and so as I start revising my paper, I will make sure I consider to mention more about the color. The second paragraph, I have not completed the second paragraph. I am still working on it. Again, this is a rough draft. It is not the completed rough draft. This is the partial rough draft. But I have moved to describing and explaining the rat, which is the subject. Again, I'm following my outline. So the subject of the rat, and if ever you, as you're building your outline or working on your paper, and you don't know what to do next, always go back and refer to your image. And so here's my image. As I'm working on my paper and I get confused, I can always pull up my image and go back and say, oh, I remember now. And so you want to have that image or that, cartoon or whatever you're critiquing readily available, so if you have questions you can always refer back. So going back to my paper, I create a nice transition phrase from the idea of the words to the actual subject, and you want to do that. You want nice transitions between each point. You want to avoid the trite transitions such as first, second, third. You want it to move fluidly from one point to the next. So I have a transition. After reading the quote, the eyes then move to the giant rat dressed in a collar tie, name badge, carrying an umbrella and a briefcase, with red, which could represent blood, on his hands. So I move from the words to the rat. I describe the rat, but then I'm going to go into moving into my analysis. You do not want to spend a lot of time just describing the image, but you want to spend time explaining the image. So I'm working on going over what the rat represents and how Banksy wants us to see the rat. So those are some of the details that I have right now. There are more details to come, but you want to get started on this and take your time. Give yourself time to plan, draft, revise, draft again, and plan more. And this is the end of this lecture video. You'll be hearing from me pretty soon.